What really is a Spriggan? What are they like? And are they really guardians of the forest? Hi everybody, I'm Nick and this is Beasts of the Old World, a channel that explores ancient folklore and mythical creatures from across the globe. If that sounds like something you'd like, then subscribe and ring the bell for more of this content. If you're anything like me, when you see this word written down, your mind immediately hears the sound of swarming bees, and you quickly equip your sword and shield. But the famous Entish Spriggan of the Elder Scrolls series is a huge departure from its namesake in traditional folklore. As such, this creature is misunderstood today, and its name often mispronounced. Originally from Cornish folklore, the name of this creature is pronounced Spriggan, not Spriggan. This original word comes from the old Cornish word for spirits. The modern mispronunciation seems to stem from the word sprig's association with twigs, trees, and plant growth. But these creatures are far more complex than mere forest guardians, serving an interesting, if dark, role within the fairy kingdom. In A Dictionary of Fairies, folklorist Katherine Briggs describes Spriggans as akin to fairy bodyguards, known for their protective yet punitive roles within the fairy kingdom. And yet, they don't look like this. They look like this. To look at these small, wizened old gnomes, you might imagine them to be harmless creatures. But don't be fooled. Despite their apparently diminutive stature, Spriggans wield the fearsome ability to shift their shape and grow to giant proportions. In his book, Popular Romances of the West of England, Robert Hunt describes Spriggans as being one class among 5 within the Cornish tradition of the fairy family, the others being the small people, the piskies, the buccas, and finally, the brownies. The Spriggan, according to Hunt, is quite different to these others, appearing in many ways to be related to the Scandinavian tradition of trolls. He describes them as possessing enormous strength despite their small stature, and goes on to reference the belief among some that Spriggans were the ghosts of giants, who were said to roam Cornwall long ago in an earlier age of the earth. Hunt reports that
wherever the giants have been, the Spriggans have been also. It is usually considered that they are the ghosts of the giants. Certainly, from many of their feats, we must suppose them to possess giant strength.
Moreover, Spriggans have an almost innate dislike for humans and will, given even the slightest opportunity, cause you misfortune or dole out whatever punishment seems fitting to them. It is in this character trait that they separate themselves from the rest of the fairy kingdom. While the fair folk are known for their mischief making, it's also known for fairies to help human beings or even bestow gifts upon them. Spriggans, on the other hand, have nothing for you but malice and ill will. Some of the punishments they might mete out are small, such as sending storms on inopportune days, or summoning freak whirlwinds to terrify travellers. But Spriggans can also be cruel and fierce. They're known to blight entire crops, to curse someone with unstoppable bad luck, or, most concerningly, to steal mortal children and leave an ugly changeling in its place. Hunt's Popular Romances reports that Spriggans were a very mischievous and thievish tribe. If ever a house was robbed, a child stolen, cattle carried away, or a building demolished, it was all put down as the work of these spirits. That children were stolen by Spriggans and swapped out for changelings is highlighted in the Cornish folktale The Spriggan's Child, which tells the story of Janie Tregear and her infant son, whom she believed to have been swapped for a changeling while she was out at work in the fields. In what is a very dark tale indeed, especially in view of the fact that Spriggans are mythical creatures and not real at all, upon reporting her concerns to the elders of the village, Janey is encouraged to beat the changeling half to death. This, they tell her, will make the changeling so uncomfortable that it will want to return to the fairy world from whence it came, and her child would be returned. One day, Janey hears disembodied voices call to the child while out on the hills. They tell it that its fairy wife and children send their greetings. Now, despite the fact that the child is not yet able to walk, it responds to these voices rather eloquently, explaining that it won't be returning because it gets to eat, drink and sleep whenever it wants, and is having a rather nice time doing so. Janey's mind is now made up. Once she's beaten it to within an inch of its life, she leaves the changeling under the church stile, and when she returns, she finds to her relief her own child understandably terrified and baffled. The elders of the village tell her that her poor child, having been taken by a Spriggan, or beaten black and blue with a shoe, you decide, may never be the same again. Child theft is not unique to Spriggans, and their other vengeances are also not dissimilar to punishments doled out by other members of the underworld. Like boggarts, lantern men and will-o'-the-wisps, Spriggans are also said to lead lost and lonely travellers into swamps, close to crumbling cliffsides, or even into the very ruins of the castles they inhabit. However, unlike many other mythical creatures in English folklore, and except for the wooden matriarch of the Elder Scrolls series, the physical appearance of Spriggans is fairly consistent. They're described as small, wizened old men that have unsettlingly large, grotesquely ugly, childlike heads. They are found in old ruins, in barrows and in cairns. And according to Cornish folklore, Spriggans could be found at every cliff top, as well as in the giant Cornish tombs, known as dolmens. The belief that Spriggans are guardians of the forest is a misconception likely influenced by modern fantasy portrayals. While it's not impossible for this to be true, Spriggans were generally tasked with guarding mystical sites, such as standing stones, ancient tombs, and buried treasures. It is believed that these sorts of locations mark the entrances to the fairy world, which is why mystical sites are built there and not somewhere else. But the Spriggans' role doesn't end with guarding the fairy world. We've already seen the sort of punishments they are charged with carrying out upon those foolish enough to cross or offend the fair folk in some way. This is a task to which they are perfectly suited, for they seem to actively enjoy causing suffering to human beings and need very little reason, if any reason at all, to do so. If there's anybody foolish enough to try to trick the fairies, or steal from them, or else threaten them or perhaps mock them, or even just daft enough to walk too close to one of their mystical sites, well, that person is likely to be on the receiving end of the Spriggans' wrath.
One night, not so many moons ago, when the moon hung high and full, casting silvery light that danced upon the land, there was a man, a brave, maybe foolhardy soul, who believed that he knew just where the trove of ancient giants' gold lay hidden. Armed with nothing but a spade and a pick, he set out under that silver blue glow to Trencrom Hill, an enchanted place, rumoured to be thick with magic and mystery. For a while all was quiet under that starlit sky as he dug into the earth, the soft murmur of the night wind his only companion. He was sure, so very sure, that the treasure was close at hand, just beneath his feet. But then, the world took a turn towards the strange and sinister. Without warning, the heavens above grew dark as the darkest storm clouds rolled in, swallowing up the moonlight that had been his guide. In an instant, He was blanketed in a darkness so thick it felt as if it had substance, and the weight of it seemed to press him into the very rocks themselves. The wind howled like a pack of wolves on a hunt, whipping round him with such force that it seemed to pierce through his very bones. But that wasn't the worst of it. No, for soon that wind was drowned out by the terrible clap of thunder, one right after the other, so loud and fierce it seemed the sky itself was splitting apart. With each startling flash of lightning, a new horror was revealed. From the cracks and crevices of the old hill, Spriggans emerged. Tiny at first, these creatures swarmed towards them, growing larger with each flash until they towered over him like the giants whose gold he sought. Their faces twisted in grotesque expressions, hungry and wild, as if they'd feast on fear itself. How he escaped, no one knows. The man never spoke much of it afterward, only that the terror that night was enough to send him to his bed for many a week, haunted by what he'd seen. So let this be a lesson to all who hear it. Some treasures are guarded not by locks or steel, but by the shadows and the spirits that dwell within places that man was meant to leave when alone.
So the next time you come across a Spriggan, hopefully in a video game or a story, remember the rich and complex mythology behind this fascinating creature. Folklore, after all, is the story of the folk who tell it, not of the fantastical creatures contained within. It is in the changes to these stories across the hills and the ages that we can chart our own shifting culture and perspectives. It is our story, and we are always writing new chapters. Thank you for joining me on this journey into Cornwall's mythic past. If you'd like to see another mythical creature feature, let me know in the comments. Subscribe and ring the bell for new content when it comes. Until next time, keep a wary eye out for the unseen and the unspoken, for the beasts of the old world still roam wild today.